Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're listening to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where Stormy Amy may have taken out a third of our weekend's games on Friday evening in the top flight, but Saturday, it delivered the goods. Shock victories against full-timers Lauren and Coleraine takes Dungannon and Bangor's seasons to new heights. Elsewhere, Ballymena make a comeback victory against Carrick, and Portadown paint mid-Ulster red by heaping more misery onto winless and managerless Glenavon. Plenty to devour on this, your latest weekly edition of Kick and Match. Bit of wind, bit of rain, doesn't stop this podcast recording. We're here, come rain, hail, shine, and today we're in the company of the umbrellic journalism of Stuart McKinley. How are you?
I'm good, Peter. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be back. It's been a wee while.
It has. Only 4 games this weekend. We have been here before, where weather warnings, which feel like they're coming more often. You see them, you see the damage they have, the impact that they have. You see schools being closed down quite suddenly. All these, a lot of things are being cancelled. And we had moments where those games being paused or moved or postponed happened quite late. On this occasion, all the Saturday games were able to go ahead, as most of the bluster happened on the Friday. But we saw there, because we had 2 big matchups penciled in for that, one for the television. And it was strange watching it, because in Northern Ireland, the schools were called off like that morning, like a couple of minutes before 9 o'clock. All these teachers were getting emails saying, that's the warnings out there. There's winds in some places of up to 80 miles an hour, including the rain. You send the children home by noon. That clearly then filters down to other different facets of society, including sport. And the Glentoran Cliftonville game, that was like postponed instantly. And then there was a wee hope that the Linfield Cruise game was going to happen, and that eventually didn't. Do you feel sympathy for organisers here, because they faced, like last time, a bit of criticism? Why didn't they move the game to the Saturday? Why did they not move it to the Sunday? Etc. But it's not like there's many other facets of society that you go, well, they got in nice and early and said, no school children 3 days from now.
Kind of felt inevitable. Even as the week was going on, we're hearing about the storms, but certainly come Friday morning, it felt inevitable that those games were going to go. And I think the postponements were the right thing to do. I thought the message from Niffle that came out on Friday morning was pretty clear. And the experience of last December's Storm Dara, Niffle did say that they would learn lessons, and they clearly have done. Um, people will complain, but I think you leave yourself more open to complaints when matches are called off, when teams and fans are already at grounds. So I think well done to the clubs for getting the matches on too. On Saturday, we all just think about pitches, but there's other things around, and I know Portadown were posting up about things about advertising boards and other bits around the ground that maybe needed to be secured. And the advertising boards on the far side of the ground did blow over at one stage quite early in the match, and I was a bit concerned about that, but a quick prop up and they were fine. Um, so it was good that Saturday still went ahead, but Friday did feel like it was inevitably going to be called off, even though we did still have a bit of hope that we're going to get a TV game. When the BBC decided to switch from Solitude to Windsor. Um, but people were asking why the matches couldn't be arranged for Saturday or Sunday. Well, Cliftonville ladies were playing at Solitude on Saturday night, so that wouldn't have worked. And I believe, although I could be wrong on this one, but I'm led to believe that Windsor couldn't be used on Saturday due to internationals, um, because it needed a clear run from Saturday through to Friday before the Northern Ireland games are played. Um, Again, I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but that would explain the reason why those games weren't arranged for Saturday or Sunday. And then see Jim Magilton was at the Ipswich Norwich Derby, so maybe that's why they couldn't play on Sunday either.
I'm starting to feel like, and other people have said this to me now, that something as official as a weather warning, that might just be a game set match in the future, won't it? Yellow, amber weather warning, game in this vicinity, just it's gone, or you should expect it to go.
Well, I think that was what Niffle's instruction was on Friday, and to do with if the games in this area are going to be off, a team travelling from this area, that get their game will be off. And I thought it was a pretty good guideline to go off. At the end of the day, you look at people's safety, and in this day and age, there's an outcry if anything happens. So I think you've got to just err on the side of caution. Much as we all want we all want the football played, we all want our little fix every weekend. Um, Sometimes you just have to realise that it's not all that important. And to be honest, even I was at Shamrock Park Saturday evening, and the wind, sitting in a press box, you don't get an idea of what it's like. Um, and it didn't seem to have that big a factor. But I'm sure on Friday night the wind would have been a major factor and could have been a bit of a spoiler. And we don't really want that happening either. We want games played in fair conditions, and the outcome decided by who's the best team, not by the ball getting blown into the net or circumstances that lead to the ball going into the net because of the wind.
I think it's important to reflect some of the severe weather we've seen over the past 12 months, and many people have been very lucky that it's bar maybe a hole in the roof of your garden shed or a bit of garden furniture blowing over, you got through pretty okay. But you nailed it there in that there is many people coming from far and wide, and the game that is happening might not be in a place that's being hit with 70, 80, 90 miles an hour winds. But we saw in, I think maybe I'm mixing up the two storms, but Storm Dara, the one that was before Christmas and after Christmas. I mean, I know around in South Belfast and in housing area, there was bricks, a whole wall of a 3-story building fell onto a road. And if there was someone driving along that road that was driving to go to an Irish League game, and that's the reason why they're on the road when it wasn't as dangerous or predicted to be as dangerous as some of the previous storms where they're saying don't go to work. But there was a young fella in Donegal that lost his life earlier on this year going to work due to a tree falling over and blowing in this cart. Tragic. Imagine that happened to a fan or a player involved in the game because 60 miles away where the wind isn't as bad, that's where they need to be going. I do think we can hit pause and just say, we'll come back to it. It wasn't a waterlogged pitch. It wasn't a bit of a windy day. It was a weather warning with high speed winds.
You only have to go back to round about this time last year when there was what 3, 4 Dungannon Swift players involved in a car accident on the way to a game, and that was on
Absolutely.
a day when there was no problem. Um, so you're running the risk of the percentage of that likelihood being increased. Not worth the risk. Anything could happen here, and I even go back to the mid-90s when on a Boxing Day at Mornview Park the wind was blowing. There was nothing wrong with the pitch. There was nothing wrong with anything inside that particular area, but the guttering from behind the stand was being blown over the roof of the stand onto the pitch. And Alan Snoddy abandoned the game because it's his responsibility to safeguard the safety of the players.
Sometimes it's not totally obvious. Like we've just seen over the past couple of weeks there the death of 21-year-old
Yeah,
Billy Vigor. 21 years old, and it was a wall, and there's walls around many pitches, has been over the years. We saw the incident with Paul Hickley. Sometimes it's not obvious where the dangers are and where they could come from, and 99.9 times it's not an issue. But that one time it is an issue, it could have grave consequences. So I think we may just get used to the idea that if a weather warning is coming, you're in a good place, or you're lucky if your game goes ahead and it is safe for everybody. So we go from a 4-game week this weekend. We've got another 4-game weekend coming up. So it's going to be a while until we see the likes of Linfield and Cliftonville play a game. But you look at this, and despite not playing, Glentoran haven't played for 2 weeks. And they're probably sitting there smiling after this weekend. Ditto for Linfield. So when there was chances there for the likes of Lauren and for Coleraine to try and build up those points and really establish themselves in this top 4 that many people, including myself, are predicting, they've slipped up. And the biggest slip up, and perhaps I should be framing this as brilliant Bangor rather than poor Coleraine is down there, Clanny boy, and Bangor able to hold out 2-1 against a very hot Coleraine side, and Rory Higgins is sitting there with his side, licking his wounds, rightfully frustrated, I would say.
Firstly, about the games being off, it is going to mean that Cliftonville Crusaders Linfield are without a game consecutive weekends. Change managers' thinking ahead of the League Cup games, and there may be some managers are going to field a stronger team than they might have done in the League Cup. Um, Although I do think that teams will field stronger teams now anyway, with the incentive of the European playoff place. I think that was done for that particular reason, and to give the competition a bit more credibility in that way, and with stronger teams being put out. But yeah, going back to Clandy Boy on Saturday and listening to the radio beforehand, I think the sense was that um, Bangor may get the better of the conditions in the second half, but ended up going in at half time 2-0 to the good, and being able to make the most of those conditions then in the second half to protect that lead with 10 men. And yes, it probably was a bit of a surprise result, but really, I'm not sure I was all that surprised given how Bangor started the season. Um, they're they're a force to be reckoned with in this league. They play a certain style and it works for them. The front players are an absolute handful, big, strong, really tough to defend against, and they've gone and got a big result against the team that's fancied the challenge for the league. But the Bangor will be strong at home. I still believe, and having seen them at Portadown a couple of weeks ago, um, they could be tough to beat away from home as well because of that style they play. They don't play too much in their own third. They don't play too much in the middle third. They get it up into the final third into those big strikers and then try to play off them. But that's when they do actually play some nice stuff in and around there. And the execution at the top end has been working for them.
It is all about execution at the top end. Execution's also the perfect word when it comes to their set pieces. I just every time I look at a result that they get, I see another team who have either taken their foot off the gas, they haven't done their homework, they haven't treated them as a real threat, and Bangor have outworked, outwilled, and outfought their opposition. And this was another perfect example of that. The first half highlights is dreadful for Coleraine. They are just going around the pitch so lackadaisical. They concede off the back of a set piece, and I'm thinking, surely you should know that Bangor are dangerous. We all know about their big physicality at the top end of the pitch, but they've scored goals all season from set pieces, and Bangor just Coleraine just didn't seem to be that focused or switched on to deal with the ball coming in, and then the second goal, which catches them out, it's just a poor, meek pass into the middle that's well latched onto, and the ball goes forward, and then it's in the back of the net. I really do not want to take away from Bangor at all, but Coleraine played a massive part in what should have been a very important 3 points. All of those teams at the top end of this league should be seeing this as an opportunity to build up. They're all full time, and they really shouldn't be getting caught in the way that they did against Bangor. I'm very surprised about how organised they've looked at the back in particular and how well they've been able to marshal out other teams. But you could see that the side that were playing in that second half for Coleraine, albeit a lot of it was against 10 men, and then that first half were just two different sides. They lost that game in that first half, Coleraine did.
I don't think teams should be surprised by Bangor if they've done their homework. I saw them a couple of years ago in the championship, and they looked really well organised then and pacey, break quickly. Um, and they've, they've gone and added some more Premiership experience. You know, wily old characters. Gareth Dean been around, Mark Hockey, solid defender. The great thing about Mark Hockey is he's been staying fit as well. Um, and then they managed to pick up Harry Lynch from Glenavon, who is at a good start, albeit he's the player that got sent off. I thought the red card was very harsh. Um, yes, it's a free kick. There's no question about that. But I'm not sure it's a yellow card offence. And we all know that. the threshold for a second yellow card, albeit it's not written in the rules, is usually a little bit higher. Um, but from the highlights, a lot of what Coleraine did in the second half was put high balls into the box. For me, the way to open up a team with 10 men is to keep the ball moving, keep it on the ground,
And they're good at
which
that.
goes, yeah, that's about to say, which Coleraine are very capable of doing. I've seen them do it this season. They're nice to watch, they're really good on the eye. And far be it for me to tell Rory Higgins how to do his job, but it just seemed to be different to how I've seen Coleraine play. Um, and they reverted to something that isn't what I've seen them do against 10 men when what they do, I felt was the way to play against 10 men.
This is the side that many people predicted was going to be Coleraine. A bit naive, a bit higgledy-piggledy, thrown together, not being able to break down teams who are well prepared for all their attacking threats. And for the early parts of the season, they look to have shoved off that kind of reputation. But on Saturday's offering, you got to say that they get by beating Carrick last weekend. They've had a few games where they've left it late and maybe got results where otherwise they maybe would have not got against likes of Glenavon and other teams. But they just didn't have that same splice of luck. So they've had enough warnings, or at least they should know that against the way Glentoran have started the season, against Linfield, there's a little crack in the door and they should be exploiting it and push forward and not have these off days like they've had against Bangor. No team is going to be perfect. But if you're a Coleraine fan, you're feeling so frustrated by the fact that they lose to a team away from home where you would think that should have been easy 3 points. Now, let's talk about Bangor here. They have officially continued the trend that we've seen over the past now 4 years. A team who've been in the championship, building up their core, their squad, and they've come in, started bright, and from Newry to Loughgall to Portadown and now Bangor, we know how this trend ends, and that is with safety. It's being helped a bit by the fact that the team that is bottom are massively far and away bottom, and they're not like they're yards away or miles away from 11th. That could very much be a reality for them. But I don't think there's many people who if they were predicting their bottom two at the minute, would have Bangor. Someone who said they were going to finish 12th, that doesn't look like it's going to be a reality for them. And it's now up to the next, I would say, 5 to 6 games to just really establish that we are a team that's here for the fight and we're going to get results and we're going to be tricky to play against, because they could have even more points if that game against Carrick had finished the way it was going.
Yeah, well, funny enough, I just remember speaking to Dean Smith around about this time 2 years ago when Loughgall had got through the first 11 games, played everyone, and they picked up 15 points. And yes, if that Carrick game had have finished that day and with Bangor in the lead, they would have 15 points after 10, which is a great start. And it's a great way to give you a foundation to
And they
stay up.
and they're yet to play a team that's given every single other side in the division 3 points.
True. They go to Glenavon on Saturday. Um, yeah, on paper right now, you're thinking Bangor are favourites for that one. Yeah, they go there and get their 15 points on the board after 10 games, and you're thinking unless they collapse completely, they should be hitting safety some stage later on around February March time. Which is big credit to Lee Feeney and John Douglas. These are two guys who were talented footballers themselves, and that's the way they played the game. Um, the type of players they were doesn't always transfer into coaching because Lee Feeney was a fantastic talent in the Irish League. Um, but I think sometimes that type of player, the players that they're trying to work with, can't do the things that they did, the flair that they have, and they can't then coach that. But these guys have worked really well. Um, got a team there that's said it's good to watch. They press the life out of teams in the final third, and then they're very, very hard to defend against. And maybe what happened on Saturday is something that I've sort of thought about a little bit as well, with centre halves coming into the Irish League that aren't used to playing in a league like this. Um, like Cody Lance Foster's been here a year with Glentoran, he should know what it's like. But I don't think there's centre forwards in other leagues around the place like the Irish League, where it is get it rushed forward, and these guys will be in a real physical battle and bully her out of it. Um, Too many centre halves nowadays, even at the top level of the game, I think get away with a lot because all the football's played on the ground and then around them, and they can manoeuvre themselves to counteract that. Not the Irish League, it doesn't. It gets you get bombarded. Bangor getting a little bit of joy even against more established centre halves who have been round the block.
Give a bit of credit, I would say, to Gareth Dean as well in the Bangor goal. He had some big saves to make in that second half in particular, and as you saw, plenty of Bangor defenders throw their bodies at the ball. Gareth Dean was a physical presence in that box. He was just not standing on his line, waiting for the shot for him to move. He was there getting stuck in, trying to make it difficult for Coleraine and those strikers to get that ball down and find it to somebody else. And you might say there's a few kinks to kind of get knocked out here for Coleraine, and it shouldn't be unexpected. Bangor have added a bit more just steel to this side, and so far it's working really well. It makes you wonder why anybody ever doubted the fact that Arthur's was going to come up and do the business. Like, he was a player who looked to have all the traits in the championship, and there's been, and rightfully so, there's been a lot of stigma for players who score a lot in the championship and that you have to come in and really prove yourself when it comes to the top flight. Arthur's has already done that. And I know plenty of teams have been looking at him before, and Bangor have prioritised making him the absolute keystone to this side. He's under contract, and if somebody wants to come and take him away, they'll have to square a bit of investment. And the way Bangor are playing, outside of maybe some of the top sides, why would he move to a quote unquote rival? So they're in a really good place, and I think this start was going to be the real hard litmus test for Bangor, because you know the potential that they have. You know how if they establish themselves as a top flight club, they'll be very, very attractive for a lot of players, particularly those that are Belfast based. So if they can just hold their nerve, continue to keep this ship moving in this right direction, they could be a very long-term top flight team. They aren't there yet, but you can see how important this 2 month or so stretch of the season could be for the next 5 years of this club.
I wouldn't be getting too carried away just yet. You talk about this is the pattern that we've seen, um, the fourth season in a row, but what has happened to Newry and Loughall immediately after a really good season in the Premiership has gone down the year after.
And not looking particularly strong to bounce back either.
Well, look what's happened to Newry since. Loughall, mid-table at the minute. It's a long season, and that championship thing can change very, very quickly. But I would say that Lee Feedy will be trying to take it one game at a time, is the old boring saying, but he definitely will be thinking that, let's see where we are this season and then try and build it. Great to see where Bangor are after where they've been. It's a big, big testament to the people at that club that they've got this far. It's 17 years since they were last in the top flight. Historically, they were well established, long term top flight club. They've got a bit of a fan base there as well, so it's good to see that they're up there as a traditional club that were around for a long time, back in this top flight.
I think there's a lot to talk about in the Mid-Ulster Derby, but let's also talk about the top four side, which faltered on Saturday. And if I can get a big hand and pat myself on the back, I will, because I called this Swifts race into a 2-goal lead in the first half, and Larne aren't able to respond, aren't able to break them down, and leave Stanmore Park with their tail between their legs, unable to scoot ahead past Glentoran and take top spot. I think first and foremost, the Swifts are on a decent run. They've bounced back from that awful Glenavon-esque start to the season, and now I think they've won 4 out of their last 5, 3 games on the bounce. So all the panic stations around there, and anybody questioning Rodney McAree, he will feel very justified in sticking with it and his ability to change it. The big change, of course, is being Junior up top, adding that strength and that link up play for all the other players bouncing around. He's made them snap out of it. For a Larne side who themselves were on a multiple game run, multiple wins in a row, I just worried that perhaps this side lacks a bit of concentration. And that's exactly what happened in the first half. Just wasn't at the dance, wasn't at it early. And that second goal in particular. Sometimes when you make like a mistake or you haven't really been on your A game to start the matchup, you try and kind of like refocus and try and do the hard things to get you going. And I think they were overplaying in that lead up to that second goal, where if they just calmed things down and stuck to their guns, perhaps they wouldn't have been in that position. But fair play to Swifts. Great victory for them.
Fair play for you following a large defeat. They'd won six in a row and had six clean sheets in a row as well. I think expecting Lauren to lose a game after that run isn't something that too many people would have been calling. Um, Dungannon, they had an awful start. You probably didn't expect that to last too long. Although, what I would say is that they aren't the team that they were last season. They did very, very well last season, obviously finishing in the top six, winning the Irish Cup. But the squad is as strong as it was when you think about the players that they've lost. McGovern up front is a big loss, and Dean Curry at the back, another big loss. And the day I saw them earlier on the season against Portadown, Declan Dunn, the goalkeeper, was suspended as well. And then Gail Bigger and Mana got sent off. So that was their entire spine, that spine that got them to where they got last season. Probably the most successful season they've had, possibly in the club's history. They were all missing that day. But you look at the two goals, there's nothing particularly pretty about either of them. The first is the kind of thing that they probably need to do when they have been down on their luck, is just sling balls into the box from a corner in those conditions and see what happens, test the defence, and it wasn't defended against. And like I say, the second goal was a bit of a mess from Lauren. Um, and again, a team that had a big record of clean sheets there. It's an absolute calamity in comparison to their record of clean sheets. It was a little bit surprising. Um, Dungannon are capable of that. They've shown it. Stanmore Park's never been a fun place for visiting teams to go to. I might give Lauren a bit of a shake up. Gary did say that he felt they didn't turn up. Maybe they did have one eye on top spot, but it's way early to be looking at that type of thing, especially when Glentower got a couple of weeks off.
Well, it definitely highlights that for me, perhaps Lauren they've been built to win a certain way, and when it comes to like a real coherent style of play or how they decide to break down a team like Dungannon, perhaps they just don't have that expertise, that wideness, that experience. We can all get excited about the young attacking talent, but when you're away from home, 2-0 down early on, how are you going to break down a team who have got big, physical, wily players that are just happy to try and take you down, whilst also having that ability to break through very, very quickly? So, Lauren were clearly off day for them. They go again. They're not a bad team overnight, for sure. I just wonder, just highlight potentially the difference between, and I mainly look at Linfield here and these other sides like Glentoran and Coleraine, because we all were so shocked to see Linfield lose away from home with Bangor, and just all the other sides haven't really been able to keep up their side of the deal. And now Linfield they'll have to get back at it. They'll have to take on all these sides, and of course they'll have their wobbles. But I think perhaps they've shown that over the years they're so dominant at home, and it's now up to these sides just to clean up their act and try and copy that. We said when Linfield didn't win the league, the points total were still really impressive, and it just was other teams being even just more impressive. Obviously, this being Lauren, and I think maybe results like on Saturday show that it's not like they're losing to each other, they're drawing to each other, and those games will come. It's that in a season where everybody bar those four teams have done well, they've slipped up here. So let's talk about the Swifts. Where do they go from here? Because they've been able to shake off, like they go into that game against Glenavon and they're on 0 points against a team who also feels they should have been doing better at that point. They win, they lose, and then they've been able to beat many other teams around them, and they're back up. People were thinking, I knew they weren't going to be a middle of the road team. They're going to be struggling down at the bottom, based on their points total right now. They're seventh and fifth, and technically fourth. But Ballymena, who are the leaders of the rest of the pack, they're only 4 points off them. So they still have time. Of course they do, to try and make themselves the best of the rest contender, which I'm sure was an aim based on all their successes last year.
Yeah, I was looking at the table and the fixtures earlier on, and I'm thinking this weekend it's only going to be mid-October, and we've already got the first round of matches complete. But we'll still be saying, "Oh, there's a long way to go." Um, and the pattern is sort of being established, a predictable enough pattern where Coleraine, Glentoran, Lauren, Linfield are leading the way, and you use the term "best of the rest," and that is what I think that is what the fight's going to be. Um, there's no doubt Dungannon would be capable of being that team. They were last season, and I've always liked the way, no matter who the manager's been, what period it's been over the last maybe 10 years, they've always had a sort of strong enough striker, but also players around the main striker that will just break with pace. Pace frightens even the best of defenders, and they've still got that. It is a blow for them. Now that we've seen they're going to lose Mass Galvin. Young player, exciting player. Rodney's just got a habit of unearthing players, whether it's coming through their youth or picking them up from around the local area, or his contacts and the players he previously worked with, like Bigger Amana, like Junior, who's come in and done well.
On that note of players that kind of are unearthed, I still think like he got the goal in Europe. But if you go watch Dungannon, the one player that stands out just from a physical presence and the fact that he's got 67 or whatever in the back of his shirt, Sean McAllister, if he can build his confidence even further, I don't think he's a player that maybe lacks belief in his own ability, but if he could maybe have that freedom or have that just want to kind of take over games a bit more, I think he has all the traits to be able to just dominate midfield, push players out of the way, run at defenders. He's almost in this kind of mix between midfield, wide player, attacker. Like there's a touch of like a Kevin Braniff type player in the modern game where you're like, is he a centre forward? Is he attacking midfielder? Can he play deeper and influence the game a bit more? I just think he has a lot of the things that you might want from a player that you rarely see in a bottom half. If you might say Dungannon Swifts would be an atypical bottom half side. I don't think you've seen any game where it's a full performance of, wow, Linfield, whoever, they're going to be after a player like this. But he's shown it to me in flashes. So he just stands out amongst that pitch. And if he can maybe get more within the goals, be a bit more clinical at the top end of the pitch, I think he might be the one for them. But Lauren, I mean, how much do you analyse a bad game after all those clean sheets and victories? It's the first real blotch on the copybook.
Sometimes there'll be a game where a manager just goes, just chuck that one in the bin and look ahead to next week. And that's possibly what it'll be for Gary. Um, Earlier on, he said himself that they just didn't turn up and didn't perform, and can't you can't do that in this league. You're talking about the teams taking points off each other and uh, beating each other. Somehow you sounded surprised when you said that. I don't know why. Long term, maybe we're in a position where we think that these top teams, the full time teams, are just going to blow everyone away and win every week. But it hasn't happened. It hasn't always been the case.
Well,
Gunnan slips up and it'll carry on happening, I believe.
The quarter season catch up on this podcast is not that far away, and if you were to talk, if we were to reflect on giving these teams, a grade or fan base, what's the temperature check? No one's going to say Glenavon feel great, positive in the future, but I mean, I feel as though there's from 11th to 5th and maybe beyond. Yeah, Bangor fans are probably thinking, oh, this top flight malarkey is great crack, we're loving life. But from Cruise, maybe less so, Carrick, Cliftonville, Portadown, Swifts, even Ballymena, despite having the victory this weekend, they're all saying, this has not been a particularly great start to the season. So if all of those teams aren't feeling particularly brilliant about themselves, it suggests that the teams at the top end are getting a bit of daylight. And we still do have, like, there's Ballymena playing 10 games and they're in 16 points. They're equal points with Linfield, who have only played 7. All those teams in the top 4 at the minute, Coleraine, Larne, and Glentoran, none of them have played 10 games. So if you were to give them all a full whack of games, maybe we would think that any sort of result against them is a lot more surprising. Like, between the 4 of them, they've only lost 5 games outside of
And the
Ballymena.
one that Coleraine lost, well, sorry, the two that Coleraine lost have been against the teams that are actually above them in the league.
Yeah. So, like, I know the only teams who have lost less than 4, well, most of them have lost pretty much 5 and above themselves outside of Bangor and Carrick and Cliftonville, but they've all played less games. So I think we could see that expand as those games eventually get played. But based on this weekend, maybe they just were fast starters and teams have finally got their bearings and away they go. I thought last week that, based on all the results post beating Linfield, that Ballymena were going to be this consistently inconsistent team, which still looks like it's going to be a top 6 side. And if I'm going to pat myself in the back for saying that I think actually Dungannon were going to catch out Larne, I may also put my hands up and say that I didn't think Ballymena were going to take care of business at Carrick Rangers. And going a goal down, I thought, your boy Peter over here is having a good weekend from his prognostications, but got to give Ballymena credit. They dust themselves down, and it's a comeback victory for them away from home. And I think many people outside of the Ballymena bubble have been wondering, where has this boy been? Has it been an injury? What's it all about? But McNichol finally gets a start up top. He misses a really well worked opportunity from him. Doesn't even get it on target. And Ballymena must have been thinking at that point, oh my goodness, he does so well to take it away from the man, get into the box, and he can't even hit the target. This is not going to be our day. But he keeps fighting, helps them get a corner, which they score from, and then it's his run into the box and finish, which helps give them victory and a brilliant 3 points ahead of what's going to be a top 4 murderers row in October. Nothing looks more scary than Ballymena's fixtures over the next while. So they needed this victory to really establish themselves in the race for the best of the rest. And it's the first bit of steel I think Ballymena have shown. Like, they can flash against Linfield. That's brilliant. And they can, they can get a nice victory against Glenavon at the start of the season, and they, bit by bit, have won the odd game. But I kind of thought that win against Carrick, who, yes, have fallen off the wagon ever so slightly. Well, not ever so slightly, they've lost 4 in the bounce. But I think it says to me that maybe Ballymena could be a bit more reliable. Or is this just the high of the inevitable low of the inconsistent Ballymena United?
Consistently inconsistent is the exact term to use for Ballymena. So you look at the start of last season where they couldn't buy a win and then they go on an amazing run where they're almost unbeatable. They were the only team outside Linfield to occupy first place at the table, I think, last season, and then didn't make the top 6. And then the season, the patterns just coming again. They were very good. They were a good value for that win against Linfield. And the 2 goals on Saturday, 2 different types of goal. First one's a corner just whipped in on the day like that. It was a bit of wind blowing, similar to the Dungannon one. Just tested the defence, and the defence didn't really deal with it particularly well. The chance that McNichol misses is a brilliantly carved out chance. Great opportunity. And you can see his reaction when he put it just wide. Oh, strikers dream of that chance all day long. Um, but then the second goal, the winner, it's a great move. So, I mean, they've got the players. capable of doing that. I
They
believe
have the players, but do they have the team? This is what I find very odd. Like they've got Kennedy,
like
they've got a striker, they've got defenders, they've got wing backs, but how does it all flow? I appreciate they've got victories, but it doesn't feel like it's particularly like running very smoothly.
they've been beset by a few injuries as well. I believe that they're a bit light in midfield at the minute. I think that was only Darragh O'Connor's first start on Saturday, and we know what he's capable of. Glentoran, McNichol again first start, and Josh Carson. Those type of players, they get those players back on the pitch on a consistent basis. Um, you might see things being a little bit different, and that's what Jim will be hoping for. Um, and if you go back to when Jim was appointed, Ballymena really struggled early on, and there was questions being asked. Was Jim going to cut it as a manager? How long would he last at the job? To be fair to the people at Ballymena, they stuck by him, and he's proved his worth. The other guy I really like in the Ballymena team is Big Success Edigan. He must be impossible for defenders to play against. You don't know what he's going to do next. I'm not even sure he knows what he's going to do next. Albeit he's only got the one goal so far this season, but when you've got someone like him,
It looks as though Jim Irvin's moved towards this idea of somebody trying to anchor the side up near the top. So far, that has been when he eventually kind of came on to this idea, that was Success Edigan. McNichol's got his opportunity up there. Both similar players in shape, and I think McNichol's really taken his chance very well. We were speaking there about Arthur's and the championship and having to prove yourself. That is your welcome to the league moment. That is the probably the game we'll always refer to unless he keeps up his momentum here for McNichol. He's a top flight player now, and he made things happen for Ballymena, and that looks to be his shirt to lose. And outside of that, Cian Corbally, who's a young attacking player, looked like he was also trying to make his impact on the game. James Hood's a very young midfield player, and if they can maybe get those guys as a bit of a core outside of all the players you were talking about there in midfield, they really could have something. Yes, of course, Ballymena have had injuries, and name a manager who's not getting results, and there's players on the sidelines who doesn't mention it. Like that's going to be their thing. However, that's what your job is. You're not. Your job is not to try and win with the 11 players that you think are the best. As a manager, it's about trying to use a squad to get victories. They've got one. Let's see if they can keep it up. I sometimes wonder when you're playing all of the big sides like that, as they will do, because they now go on to take on Coleraine, this is outside of the cup, of course. Then Glentoran away from home. Then Linfield away from home. Like, Lauren at home all of a sudden feels like a nice game. There. So I sometimes think, yeah, you can get a bit down in the dumps and maybe lack a bit of confidence after maybe two losses or a draw and a loss. But sometimes it can really focus you in on how to play against a team like this. Because if you're going from Glenavon one week, Linfield, Portadown, Glentoran, you can kind of get caught in between mindsets. So I wonder if they can focus on a strategy against sides who are likely to have the ball more and have far more dangerous players going forward, and stick to a strategy that gives them results by hook or by crook.
I wonder are these the easy games for a manager going into Derby on Saturday against Coleraine. Surely the players don't really need motivated for that. Then the next two games are away to Glentoran, away to Linfield. I always say teams raise the game when they go to the Oval, go to Windsor Park, and then the game after that is another derby. They do like to call it a derby against Larne. Maybe maybe Jim just needs to pick a team and say, "Off you go, boy." Like you said, the system, the setup, and that against all four teams is probably going to be similar too. Um, that doesn't mean it's easy in terms of getting results out of the game, but we've seen it with Ballymena, getting that result against Linfield, and like say they're remarkably inconsistent, and it's maybe against the better teams where they get more out of them rather than thinking that they're just going to turn up and win.
At least with Ballymena, Jim Irvin's going to be able to tell those players, We beat Linfield. Let's do it again. Remember what we did there. Try and keep that focus. Try and keep the mentality, and let's give these boys a game, because of course you don't want to get a shellacking. Of course you don't want to be on the end of a real beating. But also, like, sometimes teams going against the top sides in this division could get caught up in, we're unlucky there and good performances and maybe the next time. But if they go against these four teams and take 0 points, it doesn't matter if you lost out due to a last minute penalty. You get 0 points. So I think they're going to go into these games, and they should go into these games, and I'm not saying they wouldn't, but like, there's something to be said here of going, let's think about the result rather than the performance when you have these big sides. Let's try and get the draw, sneak a win here by hook or by crook. Because a great performance against whatever it may be, Linfield going into Glentoran, and then Glentoran are 2-0 up before the half hour mark, means nothing. Sometimes you get a good result but you lose, or a good performance against a big team, then you lose, but then you take that into a Carrick, and then that helps you build on something. So I think this is going to be a unique but intriguing test for Jim Irvine to try and get his team up and running and try and be a bit more savvy. Savvy was the words I would have described Carrick Rangers with at the start of the season. And I was very bullish on how I thought they were going to be hard to beat, and looks as though they've got something up top that can really penetrate, and that could help them massively in getting points. But 4 losses on the trot, being at the wrong end of the scoreline of a game that was then eventually postponed against Bangor. It's obviously too early to say the wheels have come off, but it has all the hallmarks of it.
I don't know much really about Carrick in terms of having seen them this season. But I do know they've got that experience, Pro, Gallagher, etc. Back. It's probably been a big help to them at the start of the season. I saw them last season when they were struggling and they were just desperate to get any sort of point on the board. And Stephen, tactically, one night at Shamrock Park, they dug in, they defended really well, frustrated, put it down. But at the other end of the pitch, they had Pearson, Gibson, and Heatley, which was causing problems on the break. Maybe age and maybe a little bit of a struggle for mobility at the back is a problem at Carrick. Um,
Yeah, you worry about the cold nights, don't you?
well, the question is, can you do it on a cold, wet Tuesday night at Taylor's Avenue? Maybe that's the question that you're going to ask about the home team rather than the away team, is it?
With that, they've got a significant game in wrapping out their first rotation around the fixture sun against Portadown next week, and they're going to face up against a Portadown side who are 2 wins on the bounce. Big victory away from home against Cliftonville last weekend. They then follow it up with a come-from-behind victory against a somewhat hapless Glenavon side at home. And then they go away to Taylor's Avenue in what could be a really intriguing fixture when it comes to those sides near the bottom of the table. Because as much as Glenavon are sitting pointless, you have Crews and Carrick who are propping up the table with Glenavon with 10 points each. Then it's Cliftonville with 11, Portadown, Dungannon and Bangor with 12. Bangor play 1 game less, and Ballymena have got a tiny bit of light between them and the rest. We were talking so much about Carrick being, if they can sneak by and get points here or there, they could be looking really good. And if they got a victory against Ballymena, a draw here or there, they would be up there with Ballymena. But at the minute, the goals have dried up a wee bit, and they're a bit more leaky at the back. So that's where games against Portadown will define it. But they will happen time and time again. Going back to the Mid-Ulster Derby, 5:30 kickoff, kind of that last game of the weekend, and Glenavon take the early lead, and you're thinking, well, a bit of bounce back from the worst side in the divisions points wise. Only their 3rd goal of the season. What are Portadown going to do? And in the end, it's a second half, much improved second half from Portadown, and they're able to finally break down Glenavon. And as soon as that first goal went in, was it Wilson who scored the header? Really, really well worked goal. Glenavon just collapsed.
Glenavon did start well. got the goal after 5 minutes, and that is something that I thought they really, really needed. They hadn't scored first in a game all season. Getting it after 5 minutes is a big, big lift. But David McDade pointed to the incident where Luke McGarrigan, the scorer, had to go off injured, feeling that they should have had a penalty in that incident, which could have changed things. But they didn't get the penalty, and B, they lost a player who looked a bit of a threat. Mobile as well, which maybe isn't that awful lot of mobility around him and the rest of the team outside of the wide areas. It was a strange sort of game in that outside of the goal, Aaron McCurry didn't have an awful lot to deal with shots wise. A lot of crosses coming in, which he dealt with fairly well enough. Um, put it out, huffed. Mark Byrne does make a really good save from Ryan Mays, but didn't have a massive amount to do either. And you've been at Shamrock Park enough times yourself, you know what it can be like when things aren't going well and the fans get a bit edgy and that. The team, Nell Curry felt that Portadown were still the better team even at 1-0 down in the first half, but very different, much more confidence in the play. Everyone, players who you expect to be the better players, then start to play. Thielen had been good first half anyway, um, but he made it a very interesting switch in the three of the 4-2-3-1 in the Ryan Tulloch had been playing on the left, Thielen on the right, Ryan Mays in the middle, and he basically brought Thielen from right to left, shuffled the other two across one position, Mays onto the right, Tulloch into the middle in the number 10 position, as we call it nowadays. And suddenly all three moved up a little bit of a level. Tulloch in particular, who a lot of his play was going backwards in the first half, and that's not always all down to him. The other players weren't really moving off him to be available to thread balls through to. But suddenly they put him into that number 10 position, and you see why there was a lot of excitement when he signed. He made one particularly great run through just after he moved into that position. So if they can get him fit up to speed in the league and get a bit of consistency out of him, he could be quite an exciting player.
People will know from my own social media that I was at an awards do with work on Friday night. So actually, this is the only game I watched in full because I was able to. I only got back home kind of around mid afternoon due to a fair amount of travel. So I was able to sit back and listen to our podcast colleague here. Keelan Leaper do commentary. I was able to buy a stream, and it felt like it was COVID again, buying and watching streams from clubs, or like the summer stuff. So I actually was able to watch this game from my own living room, far away, and I thought
And have your ears recovered from Keelan's excitement from Ben Quinn's
they were
third
very
goal?
excited for all the goals. I will say that. Um, I was chatting as well to Dave Watt, who was on the podcast the week before. It was a chance for me to see Glenavon for the first time doing their thing. Here's what I would say, particularly the first half. I looked at that game and I thought these are the two worst sides in the division. I think upon reflection, the second half, I saw a lot more from Portadown that made me thought, well, you have a bit of experience. You've got a few of these attacking players who look like they kind of work together a bit more. Did Glenavon falter? Did they look tired? Absolutely. Did their heads go down after the first goal? I thought so. And yeah, like I think it's a big victory for Portadown because a loss there, 9 points becomes six, and Glenavon I've got a bit ahead of steam. But to make that 12 points for them is pretty significant to kind of keep away that 12th place, which I still think looms for a lot of sides. And to score three at home, I mean, they need to start getting clean sheets. Both these sides do, if anything's going to change and kind of move up. So they'll be disappointed in the nature of that goal. But my big thing for me was there's been lots of talk of Glenavon and their back line and all the defenders that came in and how they haven't really been performing and how many goals they've conceded. I looked at that, I thought their midfield is really, really concerning. I know Malone wasn't available for that game, and it was kind of a mix of like Carlin and Key, and it was even Barney McKeown kind of put into that midfield area as well. And I just thought Luke Wilson, who Nal Curry was saying is only back quite recently, and Gary Thompson, who I think rarely plays a full 90 minutes. That second half, they were running the game against four younger players. And I thought if they're not able to really battle in the centre of the park against one of what will be their probably rivals down near the bottom of that table, I don't know who they're going to find joy with, because then nothing was connecting up top. Just really, really concerning for Glenavon. I know the table and all the stats suggest that they are a poor team, but we were talking about this before the podcast started. This is a big game for Glenavon, and now they edge towards a game against Bangor, where they could face off every single side and have lost every single one. But even when I think of really, really bad teams in the top flight, my mind automatically goes to the Doolin Portadown side. And even in the depths of quality that they did not have, and some of the poor games that they had, even they didn't start 11 games, no wins.
I've seen Glenavon 3 times now this season, and they haven't looked that bad in 2/3 of the pitch. But the most important third of the pitch is the attacking end. They haven't really had enough in there. Um, Clearly, scored 3 goals. I asked David McDade after the game on Saturday about the change of shape, because whether it's been Gary Hamilton, Stephen McDonald, Paddy McLaughlin, pretty much a old school 4-4-2. You know, you'd almost think that you're not allowed to play that system in football anymore because teams don't play it. They went with like a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1, whatever he wanted. And I asked David about going with that, and he just felt that
Can I say I couldn't have told you the formation for Glenavon based on what I was saying?
he just felt that um, going to the Shamrock Park to play Portadown, that was what how they needed to set up. And to be fair, Barney McKeown did play quite well in that position, and then he has to go off injured during the second half. But yeah, you're right. Luke Wilson, he was my man of the match, head and shoulders above everyone. Um, and Gary Thompson alongside him driving it forward. Portadown were very good in that area. Um, Sean Carlin had been taken off at half time against Crusaders a week before for Glenavon, and whether he would have played, even if Jack Malone had been fit, I don't know, because Jack Malone's a type that in the position Glenavon are in, if I was the manager, Jack Malone's the type of player I want on the team, because he will work all day long and he'll try and drive the team forward.
This game just really puts Glenavon in an awkward situation. Not that anyone was expecting them to get a victory, but even a sneaky draw, like it did not look particularly well the way the table had went and by. There were so many teams, there were so many points ahead of them. But you've got two teams, you've 10 points ahead of them, but they have games in hand. You have other teams like, Portadown and Bangor who are ahead of them significantly. Um, I said last week that there'd be one prong in them if they lost this game. Is there two prongs in them in regards to their safety if they lose to Bangor next week?
I suppose it depends on how the other results go, but the 10 points behind at the minute, and that's a big ask to try and make up. Already they've got to try and win 4 more games than the teams above them. And yeah, there's 28 games to go. But when you've already played 10 and you haven't even got a point on the board, where are you going to get 10 from to close that gap? 11 really, without the other teams then doing better than you already. Um, yeah, we've seen it's the worst start to an Irish League season in 60 years. Up until 1964-65, lost the first 11, I believe. I would not have expected this to happen to any team in this league, and certainly not
No.
Glenavon.
Like Glenavon fans are getting more irate by the day, it feels.
Yeah, and they're probably the most expressive fan base in the league. When Glenavon are going well, they will get roared off, even if it's a good performance and they don't win. Seen this earlier on the season. They played really well against Korea in 11v11, and the fans were so behind them. Where do they go? When you part company with a manager, there's two things you can do. You can go and headhunt the best person you think is out there to go and to come in and do the job, or you can open up applications, see what quality a candidate applies, and someone might come out of that who you don't expect. Glenavon have done both, and I think they're probably doing the right thing this time in terms of right. Okay, let's see if there's someone who we don't quite really know about that is interested in this job. I always think though that any team that I support, I want the manager. Show me your track record. What have you done before? Let me see your CV. A rookie manager is always a risk, but really, i- is it any more of a risk than anyone else at Glenavon at the minute? Because they've gone down the road of appointing probably the best manager who was available at the time, this time last year in Paddy, and 10 months later, he's gone.
Who would you appoint and why?
Well, out of the people that have been linked with it, we don't know how many have applied, who's applied. And by the time this comes out, someone could have been appointed. Um, I think the link with Michael O'Connor is quite interesting. He's someone who knows the club. He may not know all the players because I don't know many players were there when he was playing. Um, Michael is a good coach by all accounts, and the level that Michael played at, not saying it's similar to the Irish League, but it's not that far removed playing in League One, League Two from Irish League football. So he might know how to get in trenches, start digging out. But if they go down that road with Michael, that could be an interesting one.
I brought up the Doolan side from a couple of years ago for a reason. One, because that is one of the worst Irish League sides I've ever seen, from just quality, confidence, like just bodies to try and score goals up top. And that was somewhat caused by this bizarre mass bringing of players in. And I think they were trying to moneyball it ever so slightly back then. And as well as you probably well remember that. But you look at this Glenavon side, and you have similar issues in the sense that the start's been awful. They really do not have a lot of established quality at the top end of the pitch. They can't score. They're relying on young players to do it. They've brought in a lot of bodies, and it hasn't really worked. And then the way Portadown decided to go next. And remember, they weren't this early on, far away from everybody else. They decided to go with Niall Curry, who was going to come in to try and add a bit of stability. He knew the club, knew the area, felt like it was going to bring a lot of passion to it. But most importantly, he was brought in with the idea that actually, if the championship was going to happen, he could add a bit of continuity so they're not starting all over again coming during the summer. And he brought in a lot of players in January, and some of them worked out in the sense that they added a bit of the core that then became the championship side. And I think if you look at the way those championship sides who've got promotion have worked, we mentioned them earlier. Newry, building players locally, that took a few years to try and come together and eventually go up. Loughgall, bringing people together, that wasn't a one season turnaround. They go up, they use that stability to then take that into the top flight. Portadown, I think one of the more rocky promotion seasons where it didn't really work out to get to the final of the League Cup, didn't they? But it was a lot of players who had kind of come in that January, the McElroys, etc., that then kind of go through. If you're Glenavon, you do not want to go, we're down already, we're not going to fight, because Portadown fought to stay up and they did eventually fail. But is it really the right move long term to bring in their next manager with the idea that it's someone that might go, not really interested in that championship malarkey? And also, if they've got this attitude that they're trying to bring in players to save the club, one, if you're a player that can make as a difference maker, why on earth would you go to Glenavon opposed to Carrick, Ballymena maybe, Portadown, Cruise maybe? Why would you go to Glenavon rather than one of those sides, right? Because you might be down come the end of the season. And two, if you are Glenavon and you want a coach that's going to be prepared to play in the championship, because that's obviously a very likely reality, how much do you start trying to build the core of that squad to hit the ground running in the championship? That's a dangerous thing to do, because you're almost accepting your fate. And we talked last week with Dave Watt about all the issues that come with being in the championship. Can you see them trying to have... Can you have one foot trying to build in the championship, but also trying to stay up.
I don't see the people in charge of Glenavon contemplating championship football. Just don't. I don't think the fans will either. Even though they are in a very, very precarious position right now.
But because if they could be in a situation where come next season they've went down and there's a massive clear out and they're having to repeat what they did this season, which hasn't worked, and that's massive turnaround. It's just Barney McKeown and 8 other players that that were playing for some other side the season previously.
You referenced the Paul Doolan season at Portadown. Part of the problem there was the recruitment, and some of the recruitment was quite bizarre. But it wasn't just that. It was some of the players who were allowed to leave, who I thought were very, very steady players, and very reliable players. And I look at that a little bit at Glenavon as well.
Lynch, Snoddy, Isaac Bird went for different reasons.
Lynch and Snoddy,
Dean maybe.
two in particular. Like, if Harry Lynch was going to leave, I don't understand. And again, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes in this. Um, I don't understand how a player of his age was allowed to leave on a permanent deal. I would have been happy enough for him to go on loan, get a season of Premiership football, and then see, are you good enough then to come back to us? And I think he's proven he is. He's playing every week at Bangor, and he's doing quite well, albeit then he got sent off on Saturday. The one that certainly would not have wanted to leave if I was a Glenavon fan, and again, we don't know the background, was Matthew Snoddy. Matthew Snoddy, to me, appeared to be an absolute manager's dream. Versatile, good attitude, reliable, wholehearted player.
It's exactly the type of person they needed on Saturday. Bit of bite, bit of...
And yeah, he's the type of player that they need right now in this position. The other thing is, did you ever think that a team would be so reliant on a 16-year-old? I think there's a big Christopher Atherton-sized hole in Glenavon at the minute.
Well, even now, their best attacking player is McGovern, who I think, if the Glenavon slump continues, there's going to be a huge amount of sides sniffing around, rubbing their hands with glee. I mean, is that a player that might need to cash in on January or try and lock down to a long-term contract?
You talked about injuries earlier on and saying that everyone has them. The other big one is Peter Campbell. That's effectively an entire sort of midfield they're missing with the players that have gone. Atherton, Snoddy, Bird, Campbell, Chris Lowe's come in injured again. They also lost the 2 fullbacks. You've got to remember. Big player. And the 2 fullbacks I thought that was sort of Stephen McDonald's legacy that they left behind at the club. 2 quality fullbacks, and they haven't replaced them with the same quality from what I've seen. You look at that, and you're almost getting to the stage where you're not far off a full 11 of players who aren't there anymore. Again, I wouldn't go down the road of the comparison with the Paul Doolan Portadown team in terms of recruitment. It's the ones that have left, because the recruitment seemed to be quite good. And Harry Murphy, Kyle McClellan, you'd think they're 2 good solid centre halves. Something there just hasn't worked. Something hasn't worked, and they've got also Jacob Carney, who anyone who saw him when he was at Portadown, if he'd still have been at Man United now, maybe he could have been in the first team. And by all accounts, he's been fantastic for Glenavon. I only saw him twice. He had to play on Saturday. He's got an injury at the minute.
They lack width. Like, I like Corey Smith actually, but yeah.
So the recruitment hasn't been that bad, I'd say.
Weird week, because by the time hopefully you're hearing this, all the games in the League Cup have not yet been played, but we can't really go through a whole rake of them. 4 games of the top flight we have, but we look at the League Cup. Linfield are already through because they beat Queens there last week. Kind of across the fixtures, see whatever pick stand out to you. We have Institute hosting Glentoran, Dollingstown Coleraine, Cliftonville Coke United, Newry against Portadown, which is pretty tasty, I would say. We have Ballymena Ballinamallard, Loughgall Strabane, Moyola against Leanna, Welders Dundela, another East Belfast derby to sink our teeth into. Crews host Gary Hamilton's Ballymacash Rangers. Bangor Distillery, Armagh Carrick, Warrenpoint Glenavon, Newington Limavady, Dergview Larne, Ards, the Swifts. So many unique fixtures, so many like tricky fixtures, and so many potential slip ups here. The standout games, I think, are maybe Portadown going to Newry. I know Newry haven't started off their season particularly well, but Portadown can be weirdly checky in the cup and going away. Could be fun. Ballymacash going up to the Cruise after not playing a few games. Could that be a strange little scalp? I'm kind of going two divisions here, like Warrenpoint Glenavon. Ooh, I mean, talk about a team who needs a win in a big spot. And going down to Warrenpoint doesn't help things. Can Ards surprise Dungannon Swifts? They've had a bit of a sparky start to the championship. I think a real litmus test will be, can Carrick go away to Armagh City and get their winning mojo again?
That's the one that's jumping out at me. Um, Partially because I was down at Armagh last season when they put Glenavon out on penalties. And it was a tight game throughout the 120 minutes. Glenavon did have a load of chances. And that defeat was possibly sort of what done for Stephen McDonnell as well. But it was a tale of, if you don't take your chances, you end up getting bitten. So that is the one that's jumping out at me. Again, it's the whole thing with the pace up front that could cause Armagh problems. With the like of Gibson, I don't think Paul Healy's ready to come back yet. A couple of exciting ones. Glentoran going up the Institute. There'll be a lot of players at Institute that will be familiar to Declan Devine, and two Derry City legends, I suppose, in the dugout, with Declan and Peter Hutton. Could be interesting. Glenavon, yeah, if you were going to pick somewhere to go, Warrenpoint would be well down the list of places you'd be wanting to go in Glenavon's situation. But does a League Cup defeat, mean anything at the minute when they're just desperate to get something on the board in the league? Yeah, any win can help, but does a defeat really do that much at the minute?
A team, I mean, to get anything from a game, not conceding would be handy. So perhaps clean sheet number one,
Score a couple of goals.
Goal number two. The last thing you want, yes, I know where you're going, is you play a game against Armagh, you get it, or 1 point, you get a victory. That's great morale, but here comes Harry Murphy out with a 3 month leg injury, or whoever. Not to pick somebody else, but you know what I mean. A player who you want to really build upon over what's going to be a fight every week, and you've scuppered them to a fixture which really is not going to be a huge significant factor long term for them. So
well, that is another factor of whoever is the manager. If it's still David McDade, Al Quinn, and then the other guys from the backroom staff, and if they're still in charge, do they go, hold on, this game's not that important to us. We need to get points on the board in the league. We want to keep everyone for Saturday and wrap everyone up in cotton wool and just let them train and put out a backup squad of kids. We've seen that happen before in England when teams are threatened with relegation. They do not want to have any interest in the cup. They prioritise the league game. So that's a decision where the Glenavon management team have to make. Do they need to put out their first team to try and get confidence lifted again, or just do they focus on Bangor on Saturday?
Maybe it's a chance for some of those players who haven't got a huge amount of game time to really establish themselves. So that's the League Cup. It's seeded, isn't it? So that's why you have a lot of these big sides against teams lesser down the table or lesser in the pyramid. Let's look ahead to the 4 games that are taking place this weekend, all on Saturday, weather and act of gods permitting. And I want to go up to is this the North Coast Derby, whatever it may be. Ballymena hosting Coleraine. I feel quite strong this is going to be a 2-2 draw, and maybe that's just better for Ballymena than it is for Coleraine. Clearly, do you feel similar?
It'll be a Ballymena who have got a bit of a lift in confidence and belief from a couple of results there, and a Coleraine team looking to bounce back. which can always be dangerous. I'm terrible at these predictions anyway, and I always probably try and sit on the fence a little bit and go for draws. But I don't know. I've got a little bit of a feeling there that we could have a home win. Linfield have come a cropper there, so Ballymena do know how to take on these big boys at home. And we've always said that on their day, they're a tough team to beat. So I'm gonna just lean on Ballymena in this one.
What a result that would be. Crisis of Coleraine not being able to win the derby. We'll have to see. I kind of like that's being played in the afternoon because sometimes those games get caught up in the evening time. So yeah, I think that could be a fun, exciting game. We talked about it enough. Glenavon Bangor. Nothing I have seen, and particularly having seen 90 minutes against what I didn't think was a particularly great side Saturday against Bangor, who are just all bum and bluster. I don't think this is going to be a victory. I think this might be a 1-1 0-0.
So you're going for Glenavon to get their first point?
I am. Foolishly, some might say.
I think a little bit of this one is depending on what Glenavon do managerial wise. Do they have someone in post by then, and are we going to look at the new manager bounce thing? I just think the way Bangor play, quick get the ball forward and then play off Boyd, Cushney, and Arthur's, or whoever the front three may be on the particular day. It's exciting to watch. I've enjoyed seeing them, because they do break quickly then from midfield. I don't see when Glenavon struggled to cope with a Portadown team, getting the ball wide quite a bit. They're going to do much better with a Bangor with the way they attack. It could be a difficult one, and the fact that Glenavon are struggling to score goals and Mark Hockey's coming back to play against them at the back, albeit Harry Lynch is suspended, so that's a blow for Bangor. I just think Bangor are just too strong going forward for this particular Glenavon team, albeit if there's a new manager, we could get that bounce and we might get that draw that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's a draw there. I think Glenavon might just be up for the fight. They'll take on all those. I think they'll defend deep and they'll take on all the set pieces. So yeah, 0-0, 1-1 there. But I'm sure Bangor fans are believing, hey, get another win here and extend that 12th position away from them. And I would say this. I'm sure it's the first thing that's going to be on Lee Feeney's mind. Win here, 15 points away from bottom. That's clearly in their mind. They think we'll lose here and it flips the other way where they're a bit more closer then if we get a bad run, etc., etc. So I don't think Bangor will take the gas off, absolutely not. But maybe away from home, Glenavon can pull something out of a hat. Carrick against Portadown. A thriller this I don't think will be.
No, it's probably set up to be 1-0 either way.
Like a red card might add a bit of spice to proceedings, but
Portadown did win down there last season, but I also know it's historically it's a place where they have struggled at. Carrick play the way they do at times, where they are pretty strong. Not so much two banks of four, given the formations these days, but certainly a back four.
One day, Mr. McKinley, it'll come back. One day, those two banks of four will come back like New Balance trainers and wide leg jeans.
They are tough to break down. Stephen's a very tactical manager, and like I've repeatedly said here, they then break quite quickly. And on that pitch, small pitch, they make it harder for teams to break them down because they stay compact. And Portadown have been conceding and not scoring a lot of goals, albeit then they go and get 3 on Saturday. It may not be the place that's going to favour Portadown on this particular occasion. And like I say, historically, it's not been a place where they've enjoyed much success. So I don't see Portadown winning, but I don't necessarily see Carrick winning either. So if it's going to be a win, I think I'm going 1-0 or a 1-1 draw.
Absolutely. 0-0, 1-1 for me. I mean, I'm not a betting man, but if somebody said over under 2.5 goals, I'm slamming that under.
Definitely.
I don't think there'll be 3 goals scored in this game. Yeah. But prove me wrong, Carrick and Portadown. I do think a big victory for either of them would be a big victory. I think 3 points here would really end their I know Carrick still have to play other games, but I mean, it would, as other teams have played 11 games, it would make them feel pretty great about themselves. So, a lot on the line there as teams enter the first kind of third or quarter, whatever it is, of the season to be done. But I'm a bit more bullish about Glentoran and the Swifts. The Swifts host. This is a very hard game for Glentoran. Historically, I think it might be a tiny bit of an awkward first half, but I kind of like Glentoran going here and winning 3-1.
Big statement, Peter. I'm expecting this to be an absolute cracker. The way that Dungannon have picked up in recent weeks and that Glentoran are still unbeaten. They're putting their unbeaten record on the line here, I think. I think Dungannon's traditionally strong at home, albeit they haven't started the season well until the last few weeks. But it's that pick up in form that they've had that makes me think that they could possibly get something out of this. Whether it's derailing the Glens unbeaten record or not, I don't know. I'm going to stick my neck out and say that Glentoran don't win this game. But whether Dungannon win or whether it's a draw, I'm not quite sure. But I think this is.
I don't see the Sis winning,
No.
but I can see maybe Glentoran getting stuck in the mud ever so slightly and aren't able to get that winner when it's 1-1 or 0-0 or something like that. But it's a lot here for Glentoran to get excited about, because if they continue, well, one, they want to continue their unbeaten run. But if they win here with Larne not playing, that's then 4 points between them and Larne having played the same amount of games. Linfield will have 2 games in hand, but they'll have 7 points on them as well. And you never know. Coleraine doesn't go well. Ditto. Will have played 1 game less and have 4 points. So every game here for Glentoran, I know it's early doors and everybody's is expecting the fall, and it's hard to argue against history here. But I think a victory off the back of 2 weeks being away is significant. Might start slow, but maybe that rest, recuperation could play into their hands.
The table's just so hard to judge because there's been just such a difference in the amount of games teams have played. And that was a consequence of the weekend just passed, and it's going to be a consequence of the weekend coming up then. With these international call-ups, we never thought we'd see the day when so many Irish League games would be called off because of international call-ups.
Was it Gibraltar call up? Was it Dan Bent or whatever?
Just hope we don't see the day when the entire program is shelved on international weekends. Because much as we love international football, I still want a Saturday afternoon with a football game to go to.
Well, that's our lot. 4 games and a couple of League Cup potentially shocks to talk about next week. But that's us for now, Mr. McKinley. I can see some catchphrases, some phrases in general, wiggling their way into the lexicon of Kick a Match Season 4, 2025, 2026. I think we can use them now because one of them is best of the rest. If we are going to talk about this top 4, who at this minute in time would you put your metaphorical cash on being the best of the rest?
Yeah, I do think it's quite clear that pattern is emerging. Of the Coleraine, Glentoran, Lauren Linfield leading the way. And well done to Ballymena for being in touch. Yeah, you're looking at 6 or 7 teams competing for potentially 5th and 6th. Who is that 5th place going to land on? It's a tough one because even Crusaders are sitting in 11th place. I've seen Crusaders twice this season, and I've been quite excited by what I've seen. They played pretty well at Portadown in a defeat. Brooks and Bryden up front and Harry Dunlop, really exciting players. And they played really well against Glenavon Saturday week ago with Lloyd Anderson in the midfield absolutely running the show. And the McCart boys who looked quite useful as well, particularly I think it's Ollie is the winger, an exciting talent. And the other midfielder, whose name just escapes me right now, Josh Williamson. He's only 17. He looked really good in the midfield. So it wouldn't surprise me if Crusaders pick up a few wins here in the next little while, that they're a team that's fighting in for that fifth place. And Ballymena just need a bit of consistency, and they could be in that running too. Cliftonville, you expected the team traditionally in that position, but they need to get a bit of consistency as well. They've lost the last two after picking up a few wins before that. Probably out of that, and I'm basing it more on the teams that I've seen. I do like the look of Crusaders. The Declan Cadell Crusaders team is a different Crusaders team than we're used to, and
that is bold. What a turnaround!
Yeah. And I did say this, and I don't know if I'm the only one that said this, that what Crusaders have lacked is a Crusader streak in that ruggedness, toughness, experience. They're a modern day footballing team with a lot of talent. And I wrote last week that the biggest sign of that is that their number 9 is nowhere near 6 foot tall, where you're used to, even going back historically, Stephen Baxter being up there himself, Adam Leckie and Jordan Owens more recently as your big target man in the Crusaders team. But that's not how Declan's playing his football. But they're a really good team to watch. And I am expecting, as that team gels a bit more with those lads up front who I talked about, that they're going to be a team that other people will be excited to watch as well.
And finally, Glenavon, not down yet, etc., but they're not looking good. Let's talk about 11th. Crusaders are the team that's currently sitting there. Who do you think's the most likely one to be there come May, April time?
I think that's the impossible one to call right now, because you look at it and there's 2 points from 6th down to 11th. And you're thinking, I don't see any of those teams really being down there. The one that you maybe look at is Carrick, but that's just based on the fact that they were there last season. It only takes a couple more wins. Like, they started the season quite well. A couple more wins and they could be up in and around that mid-table place as well. So I think that's probably where we're going to maybe get the most interest this season. The top 4 looks like it's going to be the top 4. And I'm not the only one that's predicted that the full-time teams are going to break away. It's maybe not necessarily good for the league, but those positions from and it's amazing that it's going to possibly be so tight from 5th all the way down to 11th. And you're talking about
blood pressure for some managers. My goodness,
you're talking about maybe a marginal difference between netting a European playoff place and a relegation playoff place.
And I think I might explore this next week a bit more, but I wonder, and we'll see how the results go, I wonder will that mean we see a lot more draws between those sides? Because in the same way we'd see at the top end of the table where, a win or a loss could be quite detrimental or significant one way or the other, maybe as we get down towards the bottom, we'll see maybe Portadown against Carrick, Crusaders against Dungannon. We'd see kind of these tetchy draws. Perhaps not.
Although we haven't seen that many draws yet this season. I'm looking at
No, we have not. I'm looking at very few. Most teams even haven't had a draw.
There's 4 teams in the table that haven't had a draw yet, and then there's another 5, 6 that have only had 1 draw.
Glenavon, bite your hand off for a draw right now. Give us some of those draws. I imagine the chat from Lurgan is. But Stuart, great to have you on.
It's a good job that we don't have a pools table in the Irish League, or no one's going to be winning anyway.
Well, I appreciate you jumping on, Stuart, for your first outing of the season. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, if you can find all my coverage of Mid Ulster football around this area on the Belfast Telegraph, either online or in the paper. And also my following of the women's Premiership, which is reaching its climax in the coming week. Big title decider next Sunday. Glentoran women against Cliftonville ladies at the Blanchflower Stadium. With the title on the line. Glentoran, a point will do them. Cliftonville need to win. But those games are pretty impossible to predict given the way they've gone over the last little while. So that's set up as an exciting climax to the season, even before we get the Women's Cup final the weekend after.
Excellent. Enjoy that. All the best, and I'll chat to you soon.
Thanks, Peter. All the best.
Big one on the way next week. your favourite, your annual, your early season carnival, it is the quarter season catch up. All going well, it'll be here with you next week. And if you want to be front of the queue, front and centre, slap bang in the front row, the best way to do that is on whatever your podcast player may be. Make sure you follow the podcast, sure you subscribe to the podcast. It's free, it's for nothing. It's easy. Just go to the homepage of this podcast on that player, hit the button, hit the wheel, hit the little dots, and it means that whenever I drop that podcast, be it early, be it late, be it whatever, because this is a bit of a crazy couple of weeks for me, it's there. And it means even if it's just on a regular Tuesday, you get a little notification telling you, hey, he's finally uploaded. So, looking forward to that. Another interesting weekend of games and a big review on how far this season has went and how your team's doing next week. Lots to look forward to, and I'll see you then.